Someone forgot to tell Grandpa this isn't a church bingo night. Kyle Harrison burst out laughing, pointing at the elderly man slowly walking across the perfectly manicured lawn of the Eagle Crest Shooting Club. His faded denim jacket and stained trucker hat clashed grotesquely with the high-end surroundings. "What are you shooting with? A slingshot?" Laughter echoed throughout the club as phones were pulled out to record the humiliation. No one there could have guessed that, within minutes, that so-called grandpa would take a shot that would change everything. Forever. 12 months earlier, the Texas sun blazed down on the golden gates of the Eagle Crest Shooting Club, casting shimmering reflections that made it clear only the chosen ones were allowed in. It was a typical Saturday afternoon in Red Ridge, the kind where the region's most influential figures gathered for their weekly shooting session. Mercedes, BMWs, and custom pickup trucks filled the parking lot like trophies of success. Inside, exclusivity hung in the air. Dark mahogany walls showcased record plaques, framed photos from national competitions, and a stunning collection of historic firearms. The scent of gunpowder mixed with rich leather and top-shelf whiskey lingered in every corner. This wasn't just a shooting club. It was a sanctuary where ego and status were measured in millimeters of precision. Kyle Harrison, as usual, was the center of attention. At 32, he embodied peak athleticism molded for competitive shooting. Chiseled physique, perfect posture, uniform proudly branded by Tactical Edge, the most coveted rifle brand in the country. His accolades spoke for themselves. 3-time state champion, record holder in 6 disciplines, and star of a shooting competition reality show. "All right, folks, today I'm breaking my own 500-meter record," Kyle announced, polishing his Tactical Edge TR-X7, a modern engineering masterpiece worth $40,000. The rifle gleamed under the club's lights like a jewel, equipped with digital optics, gyroscopic stabilization, and an automatic ballistic correction system. The other members crowded around him like disciples. There was Marcus Reed, an oil executive with a gun collection worth more than most homes, Colonel James Mitchell, a retired officer running a private security firm, and Dr. Rebecca Stone, a surgeon and recreational shooter who paid $5,000 a year just in club dues. That's when the gates opened, and someone completely unexpected stepped in. Thomas McCready moved slowly across the pristine lawn, his hesitant steps a sharp contrast to the swagger of the other members. His denim jacket was worn thin, his trucker cap stained with oil and sweat, and his once white sneakers had seen better days. In his hands, he carried an old wooden case, its metal hinges creaking with every step. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered, pausing mid-conversation about investments. Kyle stopped polishing his rifle and looked toward the newcomer. His eyes narrowed with a blend of confusion and disdain. "Did someone forget to tell Grandpa this isn't a church bingo night?" he said, sarcasm dripping from every word. Laughter rolled through the club. Dr. Stone covered her mouth, trying to hide a smirk. Colonel Mitchell shook his head in disapproval. "How did this guy even get past security?" Marcus whispered. Thomas kept walking, seemingly oblivious to the stares and snide remarks. His eyes, partially hidden behind yellow-tinted glasses, were fixed on something only he could see. There was an odd calm in the way he moved, as if each step was deliberate, each breath measured. "Hey, sir," Kyle called out, his voice booming. "I think you're lost. The community center's on the other side of town." More laughter followed. Even some of the staff exchanged amused looks. The ridicule was public, intentional, and cruel. Thomas paused, turned toward Kyle, and smiled. But it wasn't a smile of embarrassment or anger. It was something deeper, something knowing. "Good afternoon, young man," he said, voice raspy but steady. "I'm here to shoot." "To shoot?" Kyle broke into another round of laughter. "With what? A slingshot?" The veteran didn't answer. He simply nodded and made his way to the farthest shooting lane, away from the spotlight and the crowd. It was as if he knew exactly where he belonged, not in the center of attention, but in the quiet shadows where real work gets done. When Thomas opened his wooden case, the creaking hinges seemed louder than the chatter around him. Inside, nestled in yellowed foam, was an M40 rifle. The weapon was at least 40 years old, but in pristine condition. Every component had been maintained with reverent care, each surface polished with almost religious devotion. "Check it out," Kyle shouted, pointing. Caveman brought a fossil, but something about Thomas's movements began to shift the mood. His hands, though aged, set up the tripod with surgical precision. There was no fumbling, no rushing. Every adjustment was made with the quiet confidence of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. Realizing he was losing the crowd, Kyle upped the stakes. "All right, here's the deal. If Grandpa hits the bullseye from 500 meters, I'll shave my head. Right here, in front of everyone." The crowd erupted in cheers. Phones came out, ready to record what everyone expected to be a hilarious failure. It was free entertainment, the public humiliation of an old man who didn't know his place. Thomas finished setting up. No digital scope, no automated systems, just a man, a rifle, and 500 meters of silence. He took a deep breath, then another, and in that moment, the world seemed to stop. The shot rang out like thunder. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and drop us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. The silence that followed the shot was deafening. For a moment, it felt like even the Texas wind had stopped blowing. The only thing that moved were the paper edges of the target, swaying gently 500 meters away. Kyle Harrison still held his phone up to his face, recording what he had assumed would be the epic humiliation of a stubborn old man. His confident smile began to fade as he realized no one else was laughing. The other club members exchanged puzzled glances, as if trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Does anyone have binoculars?" asked Dr. Rebecca Stone, breaking the silence with a hesitant voice. Marcus Reed was already digging through his gear bag. "Got one," he said, pulling out a high-precision military binocular. He adjusted the focus and aimed toward the distant target. His eyes widened as he studied the result. "What the hell?" he muttered, handing the binoculars to Kyle with shaky hands. Kyle snatched the device with the arrogance of someone still clinging to the illusion of control. "Let me see this nonsense," he said, turning the lenses into place. But as his eyes locked onto the target, his expression transformed. The color drained from his face, and for a moment, he seemed to forget how to breathe. "No, no way," he whispered, his fingers tightening around the binoculars. Thomas's bullet hadn't just hit the center of the target. It had carved a hole so precise it looked machine-cut with a laser. Even more astonishing, the shot landed exactly 2.3 millimeters closer to the absolute center than Kyle's previous record, set just 2 months earlier during a nationally televised competition. "Let me see," barked Colonel Mitchell, reaching out for the binoculars. Kyle passed them over in a daze, still trying to process the impossible. Mitchell examined the target for a long moment before slowly lowering the binoculars. "My God," he said under his breath. "In 40 years of military service, I've never seen a shot like that." News spread through the club like wildfire in dry grass. Members from other parts of the building started making their way over, drawn by the whispers and stunned expressions on the faces of those who'd witnessed it firsthand. Staff stopped what they were doing to watch the veteran, who stood in the same position, as if nothing extraordinary had just taken place. Thomas slowly stepped away from his rifle, his movements still deliberate and precise. He removed his ear protection with the same calm focus with which he had put it on, folded it carefully, and slipped it into the pocket of his worn denim jacket. There was no celebration, no triumphant smile. It was as if he had simply completed a routine task. "Impossible," Kyle finally managed to say, his voice cracking. "That's impossible. Must have been luck, just a fluke." But even he didn't believe his own words. There was something in the way Thomas had carried himself, in the stillness of his breathing before the shot, in the absolute focus that screamed seasoned experience. That wasn't luck. That was muscle memory from thousands of repetitions, likely performed under conditions far more dangerous than anything this Texas shooting club could offer. Marcus Reed was now frantically scrolling through his phone, searching for answers. "Guys," he said, urgency in his voice, "do you even know who this man is?" Everyone turned to him, waiting for the explanation that might make sense of the surreal moment they'd just witnessed. "Thomas McCready," Marcus continued, reading from his screen. "Former sergeant, United States Marine Corps, veteran of 3 wars, Vietnam, the Gulf, and Afghanistan. Twice awarded the Silver Star for extraordinary combat actions." The silence returned, but this time it carried a different weight. It wasn't the stunned hush of disbelief anymore. It was the slow, dawning reverence of respect. "There's more," Marcus added, scrolling further. He was an elite firearms instructor at Quantico for 15 years, trained some of the top snipers in the U.S. Armed Forces. His official combat record includes a confirmed shot at 1,200 meters. Kyle felt his knees weaken. His world, once built on trophies, records, and adoration, was crumbling, brick by arrogant brick. The man he had mocked in front of everyone wasn't just competent. He was a legend, a professional whose skill was forged in real battlefields, where a single mistake meant death. Thomas finished disassembling his rifle with the same care he had shown assembling it. Each piece was gently cleaned and placed in its specific slot inside the wooden case. He didn't rush. He wasn't fazed by the growing crowd or the whispering voices swirling around him. When he closed the case, the metallic click of the hinges echoed through the club like the final punctuation of a sentence no one had expected to read. Thomas turned toward the exit, carrying his quiet dignity like a suit of armor. Kyle, still reeling, finally found his voice. "Mr. McCready," he called out, the arrogance in his tone replaced by something that sounded a lot like desperation. "Wait." Thomas stopped but didn't turn around completely. "Yes? I want to apologize," Kyle said, his voice faltering. "And could you teach me?" The veteran finally turned, his eyes studying Kyle with an intensity that made the young champion feel completely exposed. "Teach you what, son? How to shoot like that? How to be that precise?" Thomas shook his head slowly. "You already know how to shoot, Kyle. What you don't know is character." The words hit like a slap. Kyle swallowed hard. Then teach me that." "Character isn't something you teach," Thomas said, his voice heavy with decades of lived truth. "It's something you earn, and usually, you earn it through pain." He turned and continued walking toward the exit, leaving Kyle and everyone else at the club frozen in silence. They hadn't just witnessed an extraordinary shot. They had witnessed a lesson in humility that none of them were ready for. 3 weeks had passed since that afternoon at Eagle Crest Shooting Club. The day, everything changed. Kyle Harrison sat in his pickup truck outside a grocery store, quietly watching Thomas McCready push a shopping cart beside an elderly woman with white hair. It was the 4th time in 2 weeks that he had, coincidentally, run into the veteran. The change in Kyle was obvious. He had canceled every sponsorship deal, sold off his high-end gear, and bought a basic rifle, one like his grandfather used when he first taught him how to shoot. But something deeper had shifted too, a restlessness that gnawed at him from the inside out. "Margaret, do you remember where we parked the car?" Thomas asked gently as he walked beside the woman. "Car?" she replied, genuinely puzzled. "We haven't driven in years, dear. My father always said women shouldn't drive." Kyle watched as Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, took a long breath, then smiled kindly. "You're right. Let's just walk home." That's when Kyle finally understood. The woman had dementia, and Thomas, the same man who had crushed his ego so effortlessly, was here, quietly caring for her with endless patience. On impulse, Kyle stepped out of the truck. "Mr. McCready?" Thomas turned, caught off guard. "Kyle, what are you doing here?" I've been following you," Kyle admitted, his face flushing with shame. "Not in a weird way, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what happened at the club." Margaret looked at Kyle with curious eyes. "Who's this handsome young man, Thomas?" "This is Kyle, sweetheart. A friend from the shooting club." "Oh," she smiled. "You shoot. Thomas is the best marksman in the world. He won all the medals in the war." Kyle glanced at Thomas, who avoided his gaze. "Yes, ma'am, I know." "Thomas," Kyle said, hesitating, "can I help you with the groceries? My truck's right over there." Thomas studied him for a long moment, as if trying to sense what was really behind the offer. "Why?" "Because I'm lost," Kyle admitted, his voice cracking just slightly. "Since that day, I haven't been able to shoot. I can't pretend those medals mean anything anymore, and I don't know how to be better." Margaret gently touched Kyle's arm. "Being lost is normal, dear. I get lost every day, but Thomas always finds me." Her simple words hit Kyle like a punch to the chest. Thomas nodded slowly. "All right, you can help, but no talk about shooting or medals. Today, you're just Kyle." On the drive to Thomas's house, Kyle learned more about the man in 30 minutes than he had from all his online searches. Thomas had been taking care of Margaret alone for 2 years. They had been married for 50 years. She had been a first-grade teacher. He'd worked as a mechanic in a small garage after retiring from the military. "Why did you never mention your medals?" Kyle asked, as they stopped in front of a modest, well-kept house. "Because medals are about the past," Thomas replied, "and I live in the present, taking care of Margaret." Inside the house was a fascinating contrast. The walls held no trophies or medals, only hundreds of photos of Margaret and Thomas throughout the years. Weddings, vacations, birthdays, ordinary moments filled with joy. The only hint of his military past was a single faded photo of young Thomas in uniform, tucked almost out of sight on a shelf. "Margaret, why don't you show Kyle your plants while I make some tea?" Thomas suggested. In the backyard garden, Margaret spoke about her flowers with surprising clarity. "This is my memory garden," she said, pointing to various patches. "Each flower represents something I don't want to forget." "Does it work?" Kyle asked. "Sometimes," she smiled softly. "But Thomas always reminds me of the important things. He's my living memory garden." When they returned inside, Kyle found Thomas in the kitchen, carefully preparing small trays of medication, each labeled by day. 5 different meds, 3 times a day, Thomas said without being asked. "Slows the progression. Doesn't cure it, but gives us more time." "How do you manage?" Kyle asked quietly. Thomas paused, then looked up. "Kyle, have you ever loved someone more than your own life?" Kyle thought for a moment. "No, I don't think I've ever truly loved anyone." "Then you wouldn't understand yet. When you love someone like that, taking care of them isn't a burden. It's a privilege." They sat in the living room, Margaret asleep in her favorite chair. Thomas watched her with a tenderness Kyle had never seen in another man's eyes. "Mr. McCready." "Thomas," Kyle corrected himself. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Did you ever kill anyone in the war?" Thomas was silent for so long, Kyle thought he wouldn't answer. "Yes," he said finally, "and it haunts me every day." "How do you deal with that?" "By trying to save more lives than I've taken. By taking care of Margaret. By being useful, not destructive." Thomas looked him in the eyes. "And you? Why are you really here?" Kyle struggled for the words. "Because my grandfather died believing I was a good man, and I'm not. I'm empty, selfish, arrogant, and I don't know how to change that." "Your grandfather isn't gone, Kyle." "No, he died 5 years ago." "No," Thomas said, shaking his head. "The people we love don't truly die. They live in the choices we make. Your grandfather lives every time you choose to be better." Margaret suddenly stirred, looking around in confusion. "Thomas, where are we?" "We're home, sweetheart, with our friend Kyle." "Kyle?" She looked at him blankly. "I'm sorry, I don't remember you." "That's all right, Mrs. McCready. Sometimes it's nice to meet people for the first time." She smiled. "You seem like a kind young man." That night, Kyle helped Thomas with Margaret's nighttime routine. The medicine, changing into pajamas, staying close until she fell asleep. It was intimate, human, and more real than any shooting competition had ever been. "Thomas," Kyle said as they stood over the sink doing dishes, "can I keep coming here? Not to learn about shooting, to learn about this." "About what?" "About what it means to be a real man." Thomas dried his hands slowly. "Kyle, being a real man has nothing to do with muscles or medals. It's about who you choose to be when no one's watching. It's about how you treat people who can't do anything for you." "Then let me learn. Let me help." Thomas looked at Margaret, sleeping peacefully in her chair. "She's going to get worse, Kyle. She'll forget more things, get more confused, more scared. There'll be days she won't even know who I am. Are you sure you want to be part of that?" Kyle thought of his grandfather, of the lessons he'd forgotten, of the man he could have been. "I'm sure." "Then be here tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp. We'll start your real education." That night, when Kyle got home, he looked at himself in the mirror, and for the first time in years, he didn't see a champion shooter staring back. He saw a man who just might become someone his grandfather would be proud of. 6 months had passed since Kyle started spending time at Thomas's house. What began as one-on-one mentoring had naturally grown into something bigger. Jake Morrison, an Afghanistan vet who worked at the club, joined the group after a public panic attack. Dr. Stone started coming by on Thursdays to help with Margaret's medical needs. Marcus Reed showed up from time to time, searching for purpose beyond business meetings and investment returns. Eagle Crest had quietly become an unofficial meeting place for broken people trying to heal. Thomas had resisted at first, but one of Margaret's lucid moments changed everything. "Honey," she'd said gently, "you've always been better at saving others than saving yourself." It was a cold Tuesday in November when Jake called, his voice tight with panic, barely held together. "Thomas, I need your help. It's my brother Alex." Thomas, who had been making breakfast for Margaret, stopped what he was doing immediately. Jake had mentioned Alex before, a younger brother who had also served in Afghanistan and was haunted by demons Jake didn't know how to reach. "What happened, Jake?" "He tried. Last night. My neighbor found him in the bathroom. If she hadn't gone to check on him." Jake's voice cracked. Thomas closed his eyes. He knew this terrain all too well. "Where is he now?" "Hospital, but they're discharging him today. Said he's not an immediate risk because he cooperated." Jake let out a bitter laugh. "Like they know anything. I'll grab Kyle and Dr. Stone. Meet you at the hospital in an hour." When they got to Jake's apartment, Alex Morrison was exactly where they expected, sitting in the living room, staring at a blank television screen. He looked around 25, too thin, with dark circles under his eyes. His hands trembled slightly. "Alex, I brought some people who want to meet you," Jake said gently. "I didn't ask to meet anyone," Alex replied, not looking up. "And I don't need babysitters." Thomas moved closer, sitting on the floor near the chair, not too close. "Alex, I'm Thomas. Jake's told me about you." Alex finally looked at him. "You're the war vet my brother idolizes. I'm not famous, and I'm no one's idol. So what are you?" Thomas took a moment to answer. "I'm a man who's killed people and now takes care of a wife who doesn't even recognize me anymore. Some days I don't know which of those two things hurts more." Alex studied him, caught off guard by the raw honesty. "Why are you here?" "Because Jake is desperate and thinks I might be able to help." "And can you?" "Probably not. Not the way he hopes." Dr. Stone stepped forward, a little cautiously. "Alex, I'm Rebecca. I'm not here as a doctor. I'm here because we all carry things." "What kind of things does a doctor carry?" "The kind that come from losing 3 patients in one night because there weren't enough ventilators during the pandemic," she said simply. Kyle stepped in next, visibly uncomfortable. "Alex, I'm not a vet. I won't pretend to understand, but I can tell you this. 6 months ago, I was a terrible person, and some mornings, I wished I hadn't woken up at all. And now there are mornings I wake up and don't hate the guy in the mirror. It's not much, but it's something." Alex looked at Jake. "So you all came here to talk me into staying alive?" Jake knelt in front of the chair. "I came because last night I thought I'd lost you, and because I don't know how to help you on my own. Maybe no one can help me." Thomas stood. "Alex, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Who did you lose?" The question hit Alex like a physical blow. His eyes filled with tears. "How do you know I lost someone?" "Because I know the look. I've seen it in my own mirror for 15 years. Alex broke down. "Danny Rodriguez. He was 19, like my little brother, and I killed him." The room grew heavy with silence. "How?" Thomas asked gently. "Bad call. Wrong route. He was following my orders when he stepped on the IED. Alex looked directly at Thomas. "You said you've killed people. Ever kill a friend?" Thomas considered lying. "Yes. Bad intel in Helmand. I lost 2 good men. How do you live with it?" "Barely," Thomas admitted. "Some days I don't live. I just exist." Alex looked around the room and saw in each face a different kind of human pain. "And you think sitting around like this will fix any of it?" "No," said Dr. Stone softly. "It won't fix it, but maybe it makes it bearable." Alex stood and walked to the window. "What if I don't want it to be bearable? What if I deserve to feel this?" "Then you'll keep feeling it," Thomas said plainly. "No one's going to try to talk you out of it. But if one day you decide you'd rather it be bearable, we'll still be here." 2 weeks later, Alex had joined the group. He seemed better, engaging in conversations, helping with Margaret on her bad days, even smiling once in a while. That's when David Martinez showed up. David was a 26-year-old vet, recently back from Iraq, with empty eyes that Alex recognized instantly. He took David under his wing, almost as if helping him might redeem what happened with Danny. For 2 months, it looked like it was working. David showed up to group, talked about his nightmares, let Alex walk him through the dark, but Thomas watched with growing concern. Alex was tying his own healing to David's survival. "Alex," Thomas had warned, "you can't save David to save yourself. It doesn't work like that." "I have to try," Alex replied. Then, on a Tuesday morning, Jake called again, this time with something worse than panic in his voice. It was resignation. "Thomas," Jake said, and Thomas knew. "It's David." The news hit like an explosion. David had been found in his apartment that morning. They hadn't reached him in time. Alex collapsed. "I talked to him Sunday," he sobbed. "He said he was better. He said he had hope." "Sometimes," Thomas said, voice breaking, "hope isn't enough. And it's not our fault." "How is it not our fault?" Alex snapped. "I was responsible for him. You told us to take care of each other." Thomas felt the sting of those words like punches. For the first time since the group had started, he questioned whether they were helping, or just prolonging the pain. "Alex," Kyle tried to step in. "David had things going on none of us could fix." "No," Alex shouted. "We failed. I failed." Dr. Stone stepped closer. "Alex, sometimes helping means accepting we can't control the outcome. That's easy to say when you weren't the last person to talk to him." Thomas rose slowly. "Alex is right. We failed." Kyle turned to him, stunned. "Thomas, you can't." "I can and I must," Thomas interrupted. "When you choose to lead, you take responsibility for the failures too." Jake still held Alex tightly. "Then what now? Do we just quit?" Thomas looked around, at the people who had become a family, now facing their first shared loss. "No," he said finally. "We don't quit. But we stop pretending we're saviors. We're just broken people trying to help other broken people. And sometimes, that's not enough." Alex looked at Thomas through tears. "Then what's the point of all this?" "To make the journey less lonely," Thomas answered. "David lost his battle, but he didn't die alone. He was loved. That has to mean something." That night, Thomas came home and found Margaret in one of her worst states, frightened, confused, unable to recognize him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry. For David, for Danny Rodriguez, for the men he lost in Helmand, for Margaret, who was slipping away a little more each day. But in the middle of the pain, he realized something. He wasn't crying alone. Kyle showed up, then Jake, then Dr. Stone. They said nothing. They just sat with him, carrying the weight of the loss together. It was imperfect, inadequate, messy, but it was real. And maybe, Thomas thought, that's what they all needed to learn, that they weren't heroes, just human, trying to carry one another through the dark. A full year had passed since the shot that echoed far beyond the 500 meters at Eagle Crest Shooting Club. It was once again a sunny Saturday afternoon in Redridge, but the scene looked entirely different. The McCready Community Support Center was being officially inaugurated, but the ceremony carried the heavy lessons born from loss. What used to be a neglected local center had been transformed into a professional space. Counseling rooms, a specialized library, licensed therapy offices, and a discreet but powerful memorial dedicated to David Martinez. More than 300 people had gathered for the ceremony. Thomas McCready stood at the podium, visibly older than he had been a year earlier, yet there was something new in his eyes. Not just pain anymore, but the wisdom that comes from it. "Friends," Thomas began, his hoarse voice weighted with conviction and authority. "When I fired that shot a year ago, I thought I knew what precision meant. Today, I've learned that true precision is knowing when you don't know enough." In the front row, Kyle Harrison, now Director of Operations at the center, watched with quiet admiration. The transformation in him was complete. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a calm, steady determination to serve. Beside him, Jake Morrison held a photo of Alex, who had returned from Dallas 3 months earlier. Still fragile, but driven by a mission to honor David's memory through his work at the center. Dr. Stone, now the medical supervisor, held a serious expression. She had helped structure the center's mental health framework to ensure they would never again face a crisis without professional support. 8 months ago, Thomas continued, we lost a member of our family. David Martinez taught us that good intentions without proper knowledge can be dangerous, that love without a professional structure behind it may not be enough. Mrs. Linda Martinez, David's mother, stepped up to the microphone when invited. At 55 years old, with silver strands in her hair and eyes permanently marked by grief, she had insisted on being part of the ceremony. "My son David found hope here," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You didn't fail him. His illness did. But the time he spent here were the only months in 2 years when he truly smiled." She looked directly at Thomas, then at Alex. "Don't let my son's death stop you from trying to save other mothers' sons. But do better. Be smarter. Get more professional help." Alex stood up slowly. 6 months of intensive therapy had changed him, but the scars still showed. "David taught me something important," he said, voice steady but restrained. "He taught me that saving lives isn't about feeling like a hero. It's about giving people the tools to save themselves." Kyle stepped up to the microphone for the closing remarks. "A year ago, I was an arrogant fool who thought precision meant hitting paper targets. David and Alex taught me that real precision is knowing when you don't have what it takes to aim alone." He turned to the newly opened center. "This place will save lives. Not because we're heroes, but because we've finally admitted we don't know everything. Because we've brought in people who know more than we do. Because we've learned that loving someone sometimes means guiding them towards someone who can help better than we can." Thomas returned to the podium to give his final words, but was interrupted by movement in the crowd. Margaret McCready had arrived, accompanied by her caregiver. It was one of those days when she recognized some things, and not others. When she saw Thomas standing at the podium, her eyes lit up with partial recognition. "That man looks familiar," she said to the caregiver, loud enough for all to hear. "He has a kind face. Must be someone important." Thomas stepped down from the podium immediately and walked over to her. "Hi, Margaret. It's me, Thomas." "Thomas." She repeated the name like it was a new word on her tongue. "That name makes me feel safe." "You are safe," he said, taking her hands gently. "You always will be." Margaret looked at the crowd, then back to Thomas. "Did all these people come to see you? They came because they believe we can help one another." "That's beautiful," she smiled. "You must be a very good man for so many people to believe in you." Thomas nearly broke down. Even in her confusion, Margaret could still see the essence of who he was, still reached him in a way no one else could. "Margaret," he whispered, "I've loved you for 52 years. 52 years, she repeated thoughtfully. "That's a long time to love someone. You must be very tired." Thomas laughed through the tears. "Sometimes, but it's worth it." "Then keep going," she said, suddenly lucid. "Keep loving people, even when they forget. Especially when they forget." The crowd had watched the exchange in solemn silence. When Thomas returned to the mic, his voice was fragile but firm. "Friends, a year ago I said precision was about hitting the target. Today I understand that precision is knowing the target isn't perfection. It's human connection. It's being present in someone's pain. It's refusing to give up even when we fail." He looked toward the memorial plaque for David, then to Alex, Kyle, Dr. Stone, Jake, and finally to Margaret. "This center is dedicated not only to those we've saved, but also to those we couldn't. Because both have taught us that the greatest kind of precision doesn't come from weapons or medals. It comes from choosing to love even when it hurts, choosing to try even when we might fail, choosing to stay even when it would be easier to walk away." He paused, scanning the crowd, faces that represented months of hard work, painful growth, and stubborn hope. David Martinez did not die in vain if his sacrifice helped us become more human. And all of you here today are proof that the most vital kind of precision isn't technical. It's the courage to keep reaching for one another, knowing we won't always hit the mark. The applause was long and reverent. But to Thomas, the only sound that truly mattered was Margaret's soft whisper, "Well done, sweetheart. Well done." As the sun set over Redridge, Thomas McCready finally understood that his greatest mission had never been to hit every target. It was to learn from every miss, grow from every loss, and build something stronger and wiser from the rubble of his own limitations. The shot that changed everything wasn't the one that hit the paper bullseye. It was the one that forced him to confront his own failures and build something better on top of them. and the echo of that lesson would continue to resonate, not as a flawless victory, but as wisdom earned through pain, love chosen in the face of loss, and hope constructed atop the foundation of human humility. Some endings aren't about winning. They're about learning how to keep trying, even when we know we're imperfect. And sometimes that's the greatest precision of all. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, give this video a thumbs up to support the channel. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more powerful stories like this one, and leave a comment below telling us which moment impacted you the most. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to watch the next video coming up on your screen. We promise it's going to move you even more.